Number 10. The Dendera lights. When was the first light bulb invented? Well, it was way after the Common Era calendar started, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe the ancient Egyptians had some hookups for light bulbs and they used to throw dope raves. The Hathor Temple in Dendera, Egypt has carvings in the wall which look like gigantic light bulbs. The Egyptians may have found a way to harness some sort of energy to make light bulbs. If we're gonna go super conspiracy theory, which we are, some people believe that the pyramids were actually power plants with copper wires inside of them. They used them to tap into the natural electrical energy floating around the atmosphere, pull it down into the earth, and send it into surrounding cities. If this is true, my Egyptian rave theory is not that far off. Number 9. Robots? We barely have robots now, and you're telling me that before they had toilet paper, they were making robots? Well, not that high tech, but it's still pretty cool. In ancient Greece, Philion of Byzantium made a working maid. The way this contraption worked, it was a statue with moving parts. It was perfectly weighted with a pitcher in one hand and the other hand was open. When you placed a cup in the open hand, it would shift the weight of the statue, causing it to move and pour the pitcher into the cup. Basically the best bartender ever. He'll never cut you off. This was one of the only artifacts like this, so it's most likely that robots weren't commonplace back then. It was probably only the super rich ancient Greeks that could afford it. This robot was the 8K TV of its day. Number 8. Turkish gilding. Over 8,000 years ago, the Turks were ballin'. They were putting gold on everything. They put gold on your house, gold on your chairs, gold on your baby. I don't know if that last one is true, but it was 8,000 years ago. I'm sure someone had to try. Who wouldn't want to put gold on a baby? That'd be dope. You have a golden baby. The Turks would use mercury to perfect this gilding process, and they were so good at it that we still haven't figured out how to do it to this day. It's 8,000 years later, and with all the technological advancements we have now, we still can't find out exactly how they did it. Maybe it was aliens. Maybe the alien version of Bobby Shmurda came down and helped them put gold on everything. Number 7. Lunar tack disc. When you think of Vikings, you think of pillagers, murderers, pointy hats. But they were also some of the best sailors alive. They were kings of navigating the sea, pulling up on some foreign shore and cutting everyone's head off. So it shouldn't be a huge surprise that they might have been the first civilization to discover a compass. The lunar tack disc was discovered in Greenland in 1984. It's believed that the Vikings would use these devices at night when they couldn't use the sun to navigate. It's not certain how these devices would work, but it seems they would give the user a rough idea of where the sun would be in the sky after it was set. The lunar tack disc would work in parts with other things like wooden slabs and crystals. I never thought bloodthirsty Vikings would be into crystals. You come home after a long day of mass murder and your wife's like, whoa, your chakras are all over the place. Number 6. The bell. I don't know if you know this, but coal takes at least 30 million years to form. That's why this next one is pretty interesting. This one is a brass bell which was discovered encased in a chunk of coal. The coal that the bell was encased in was over 300 million years old, and the mine that the bell was found in was over 100 feet deep. The bell also had carvings which were similar to the Hindu god Garuda, but the bell was discovered in West Virginia. How did a brass bell with Hindu god carvings encased in 300 million year old coal end up in West Virginia? These are so many questions, but it might be signs of advanced civilizations existing in North America way before we think. Number 5. The Puri-Reis map. Cartography is pretty easy now that we have satellites. We can see the whole world from space and just take a picture and then print out the picture. But then the printer's like, I can't print it, I'm out of color. And you're like, whatever, just print in black and white. And he's like, nah, I need more magenta. And you're like, I said black and white. Believe it or not, making maps was even harder back then. The Puri-Reis map was discovered in 1929 by Gustav Adolf Deissmann, and it was an absolute marvel. The map depicted a very detailed charting of Antarctica before it was covered with ice. It was made by cartographer Haji Ahmed Muhyiddin Puri. The map is so incredibly detailed that it puzzled the archaeologists that found it. Who was able to make something this detailed without some sort of advanced technology? Also, we can't compare it to what Antarctica would look like because it's now covered in ice. So we'll just have to wait to find out if it's actually accurate. Number 4. The London Hammer. This isn't some bad 80s hair metal band. This is the discovery of one of the oldest dated tools ever. The London hammer was discovered by a couple who went out for a walk, and they saw a chunk of wood coming out of a rock. They thought it looked interesting enough, so they took it home. Later, their son decided to take a hammer and chisel to it and break into it. Inside, he found what looked like a crude design of a hammer. They took the hammer to some archaeologists, and this is where things get crazy. The rock encasing the hammer dates back 400 million years, and the iron used to make the hammer's head is over 500 million years old. The hammer's head is over 90% pure iron, so there's no way this could have happened naturally in nature. Parts of the hammer's handle have been turned to coal, which means the hammer itself is at least 30 million years old, because the coal takes at least 30 million years to form. My guess is someone jumped into a time machine and got stuck way back. Never be the first guy to go into a time machine, wait until they work out the kinks. Number 3. The Coso Artifact. In 1961, a group of hikers was going rock collecting somewhere in the California mountains. These guys were super cool dudes. They came across some geodes, which are crystals encased in rock. They took them home to cut into them to see what kind of crystals would be inside. What they found was more than just crystals, but a porcelain casing, a spring, and some metal parts encased inside the rock. The pieces all resembled a spark plug, but the rock was dated 5,000 years old. The craziest part about this is the Coso artifact and the 3 hikers who made the discovery have all gone missing. Super creepy. Number 2. Nuclear reactor. How old would you think the first ever nuclear reactor is? If I told you it was 10,000 years old, you probably wouldn't believe me. Well, this nuclear reactor, discovered in Gabon, Africa, is actually way older than that. In 1972, a team of archaeologists dug up a 1.8 million year old nuclear reactor. They were able to determine the age through carbon dating, and from the design, it seems like it was man-made. This is one of the craziest discoveries ever recorded. Some people think that it was a meteor that crashed into the Earth and just left back some nuclear energy. But other people think that it was aliens who came here to bioengineer humans and create new life, and then study it from a distant planet. I don't know. Maybe everyone's wrong. Maybe some people are right. I don't know. Number 1. Spheres. If you find one naturally occurring anomaly, you can chalk it up to chance. But if you find over 200 in the same place over a 30-year period, then I guess there might be something going on. Metallic spheres started popping up in a mine in South Africa in the 1970s. There were metal on the outside with some line markings that go down the center. They range from sizes of 2.5 centimeters to 10 centimeters. If you break into them, they seem to have some sort of soft material in them that breaks down when it comes in contact with the air. So far it's not that crazy. But these spheres are dated back 2.8 billion years. Before dinos. Before almost anything. How could you have something that's clearly crafted dated so old? Obviously, I don't have the answer, but we can speculate. Time travel? Aliens? Maybe this is human beings' second run at life. Maybe there's been civilizations that have lived on this planet before, and we're just another group taking a shot at life.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have a tiny, creepy hand. This small, lifelike bronze hand was found at the Roman fort of Vindolanda, which is near Hadrian's Wall in England. This artifact was found by archaeologists, and it quickly became quite a mysterious find. The reason for this is because of the fact that it is believed that this artifact may have been associated with a cult. This cult, called Jupiter Dolichenes, after the Roman god of course, is a mystery cult that held their secrets close to their chest. This secretive cult existed and was very popular with the Roman army around the 3rd century. This hand is believed to have been left as an offering after there was a major invasion of Scotland that left a large number of people dead. Little more about this bronze statue is known, and that just might make it even creepier. In our number 9 spot today, we have vampire remains. A few years ago in Poland, during a dig, researchers uncovered some skeletal remains that date back to the 14th century, and if this find wasn't already gruesome enough, they quickly figured out this wasn't where the story ended. These skeletons appeared to have posthumous injuries inflicted onto them. Wondering why? Someone's fear of vampires is probably to blame. The skeletons had been decapitated and punctured at the spine, which is extremely gruesome, and then the severed heads were wedged between heavy stones. This is what the lore at the time suggested was the appropriate actions for those who might be vampires in order to prevent them from rising from the dead again. As it turns out, as many of us now know, unfortunately, many of these people who were said to be supernatural or evil were probably just suffering from diseases of life. According to researchers, during this time period, people who were suffering from things like kyphosis or perhaps cholera were often thought of as being vampires or witches. In our number 8 spot today, we have Jerry Bibb Balasag's gravestone. This tombstone goes hand in hand with an absolutely insane story of Jerry's life. The story of it is that Jerry, who was a professional wrestler, ended up vanishing after getting in trouble with the law. He was wanted for charges of fraud, and while no one knew his whereabouts for 6 months, when his mother picked up a magazine one day which featured the victims of the horrible cultist Jonestown massacre, she sadly saw her son's picture alongside all of the others. This led to there being a tombstone, of course, made for Jerry, although his body would have already been buried in California. So this all happened in 1978, but let's flash forward to 1990. In that year, a man named Ricky A. Weta was arrested for attempting to take someone's life. He was fingerprinted upon his arrest, and who would have thought Ricky turned out to be none other than the presumed dead Jerry. The whole story was of course national news because how could this have possibly happened? In the end, Jerry was caught and brought to justice, but here's the thing, the tombstone. It's a reminder of the Jonestown massacre. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Vampire of Dusseldorf. If you've ever been to a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum, you know those places are stocked full of the weird and wonderful, and this item is absolutely no different. This Wisconsin museum holds the skull from the severed head of the Vampire of Dusseldorf, Peter Carton. Who is Peter? Well, this vampire man was actually a German serial killer from the 1930s. This man committed some incredibly atrocious acts for which he was tried and convicted. He ended up being found guilty for the killing of 9 people as well as attempting to take the lives of 7 more. This guilty verdict led to him being sentenced to beheading, which took place in 1931 when Peter was 48 years old. I'm not exactly sure why anyone would have wanted to keep his head and skull around, but clearly it happened and now people can go and visit it whenever they feel like it. This might be one museum I might stay away from, to be perfectly honest. I've learned about way too many cursed items here and don't want to mess around with this one. In our number 6 spot today, we have this Viking sword. Archaeologists found a Viking sword called Ulfberg that they were able to date somewhere from 800 to 1000 AD, but upon further research, they were absolutely astounded at what they found. This sword was made with a level of sophistication that wasn't seen until at least 800 years later. The carbon content of the sword is 3 times higher than other swords of the time, and due to the impurities that were removed, the iron ore would have needed to be heated to at least 3000 degrees Fahrenheit. This sword was so hard to believe to researchers that a blacksmith named Richard Furrer made a sword similar to this one and used technology that would have been available at the time of its making. He said that the process was the most complicated thing he had ever made, and he even ended up using methods that weren't known to be used at the time. This is all super cool and stuff, but it has me wondering what this sword was used for and what dark parts of history it holds. In our number 5 spot today, we have shackled skeletons. On an archaeological dig in 2016, researchers uncovered a scary sight. Buried in the grounds in Athens, Greece, were at least 80 skeletons, all arranged in neat rows, all with iron shackles on their wrists. Stella Chrysolaki, who is the head of the excavation site, said, quote, "They're all tied at the hands with handcuffs, and most of them are very, very young and in a very good state of health when they were executed." This definitely adds a little bit of horror to this already gruesome scene. Apparently, the method of burial suggests that whoever these skeletons belonged to weren't just the average run-of-the-mill lawbreakers, and they may have been in trouble for some more serious crimes. It is believed that these skeletons might be the supporters of a man named Cylon. In 632 BC, Cylon, who was a former athlete, led an attempted coup in Athens. Of course, since I just called it attempted, it didn't work out, but apparently he then fled the city unharmed. Since he couldn't be punished for his crimes, that only leaves these souls who were just finally uncovered a few years ago. I know these are people who once lived and not artifacts, but I had to put them on this list today because this discovery and story are just something we have to be talking about. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Skirrid Inn Beam. The Skirrid Inn in Wales, upon first glance, just looks like a great place to enjoy some classic pub fare, maybe some fish and chips and a nice ale, but the history it holds tells a very different story because this used to be a place for public hangings. Seems like a weird spot for a pub now, doesn't it? The upper part of the inn used to be the courthouse where people were tried and convicted, and then if the case was made, they were executed on site. It is estimated that around 180 hangings took place right in that spot. They even made the weird decision to keep the original hanging beam up, and the grooves of where the rope wore into the wood can still be seen even to this day. Also, the inn has chosen to keep the original cells where the prisoners were kept just to add the maximum amount of creepiness to the entire place. It's probably haunted as well. This beam serves as a reminder of a different time, I guess, but if we're being totally honest, have things really changed all that much? In our number 3 spot today, we have these sacrificial offerings. In 2018, researchers sent some remote-operated robots beneath the ground in Peru at Chavín de Huántar. These robots stumbled on more than anyone ever imagined when they found a network of 35 interlocked underground tunnels dating back 3,000 years. This is already fascinating and cool, and I have a ton of questions about this whole series of mysterious tunnels, but we've got to save that for another video and instead talk about what it was they found inside of these tunnels, and that is the remains of at least 3 individuals. They had found more remains of other people, but these 3 skeletons specifically stood out because they weren't like the others. They weren't the skeletons of people who had high social standings. These remains they found were from people who were actually sacrificed in rituals. They were able to determine this because of the fact that these bodies were found face down under piles of rocks, which is of course not how people of a high social standing would have been buried at the time. This discovery certainly is a reminder of different times on Earth. In our number 2 spot today, we have an executioner axe. In a Swedish museum, there is an axe that dates back to between 1770 and 1866. This axe isn't just any old axe, however, as it once belonged to an executioner who used it on 88 people. Execution by axe, as you can imagine, was a lot more difficult in reality than movies make it seem, so these axes were specially designed. Rather than being a finely tuned piece of weaponry, these axes were simply designed to crush their way through flesh and vertebrae. I'll save you any more horrible descriptions and just say that the executioner didn't have an easy job for a variety of reasons, and it certainly was a job that required them to stay in great shape. Like I mentioned with the scurried-in beam, it's definitely good that things have changed since the days of public beheadings for capital punishment, but sometimes things don't really even seem all that different. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Tower of Skulls. There's a city in Serbia that has an interesting tourist attraction. This tower dates back to a time when Serbia was still under Ottoman control in 1809. The first Serbian uprising was not going well, but the leader of the rebels, Stephen Sindelic, was determined to do something to change that. During the final stand at Cigar Hill, Stephen fired a round into a keg of gunpowder, which was inside of a fully stocked armory. You can only guess what this did. Of course, it caused a massive explosion that killed not only him and his men, but also all of the Turkish soldiers who were storming the trenches. In order to get their revenge on this move that Stephen made, the Turks then collected all of the rebels' bodies and removed their heads. They took the bodies of 952 rebels and sent them to Constantinople as trophies. And what did they do with the heads? Well, they built a tower, of course. This tower was 15 feet high, and the Turks built it right at the entrance to town. The skull tower was intended to be a reminder to not mess with them, but the Serbians decided to use their new metal-as-heck skull tower to show them what they were really made of.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Kosu artifact. In 1963, 3 rock hunters were exploring the mountains of eastern California with hopes to find geodes to sell at their gift shop. They gathered a bunch of them and took them home, where they proceeded to cut them in half. However, one of the geodes practically broke their new crystal saw in half when trying to cut it open. Instead of finding crystals, they actually discovered something more intriguing. Inside the rock mass was a perfectly circular porcelain-like section. In the center of the section was a tiny magnetic pin. An X-ray of the rock revealed that there was also a spring or helix at one of the ends. From there, people realized that it resembles a modern-day spark plug. However, it is theorized that this rock is around 500,000 years old. But spark plugs were not invented until the 19th century. So this has left people thinking that it's proof of alien visitors, saying that it came from their spacecraft. meaning they're way more clever than we realized since they created this technology thousands of years before we did. Others believe that it was left behind by time travelers. Then you have the skeptics that have tried to debunk it by saying it simply was just a spark plug from the 1920s and then someone threw it out, so it's just a piece of someone's trash that we're all hyping up. But honestly, you choose what you want to believe. In our 9th spot, we have the Roswell Rock. The Roswell Rock, as featured in a couple of episodes of the show Ancient Aliens, is a very weird rock with a detailed design. The rock is uniform in color, unusually smooth, and has a design protruding from the surface of it. This rock was found in Roswell, New Mexico in 2004. A man named Robert Ridge, a deer hunter, apparently found this rock half sticking out of the ground. He also discovered that it had strange magnetic properties. Upon analyzing it, people have realized that the rock's design exactly matches a crop circle that was found in England in 1996. Some people believe that it's just a man-made copy of the crop circles. Other people believe that it conveys some sort of message from aliens. After experts have analyzed the design, they noticed that it's a pattern of a sun and a moon inside a circle. Linda Moulton Howe, an investigative journalist, believes that the sun, moon, and skies are present throughout the solar system and all the galaxies, meaning maybe aliens are trying to teach us about astronomy. Or the rock contains some sort of date for some event that has happened or will happen. Making our way down the list at number 8, we have the ancient airplane. Researchers have noticed that the Incas left behind some very interesting objects. One of the more notable ones are the figures that are small and golden that closely resemble modern jet planes. Upon analyzing them, people have noticed that the figures have what appears to be wings, a stabilizing tail, and landing gears. Ancient astronaut theorists believe that they are a figure of planes. But we know that planes were not created back then. This has led people to believe that they indeed were in contact with extraterrestrials that had advanced technology, whereas others think they're supposed to represent flying creatures like bees or fish. But again, it's for you to decide. Coming in at number 7, we have the alien head. Okay, this one, I can't lie, it's pretty weird. In 2017, a man in Cusco came forward with an artifact that he claims he found in the southern desert of Peru. This artifact appears to be a mummified life form, eerily resembling an alien. An X-ray concluded that the skull had angled eyelids with shallow eye sockets, 2 nostrils, and a narrow slit-type mouth. Under the skull, you can see exposed bone. Now, the skull is covered in a type of clay that gives the skull a more alien-type appearance. But it is discovered that it is a real skull. But it isn't concluded that if it's an alien skull or if it's just an animal skull that has been preserved and then morphed in appearance because of the clay coating. But what's weird is apparently there have been tons of skulls discovered in Peru. Lots of them have elongated skulls, which aliens are said to have. Maybe it's evidence that alien species were once inhabitants there. In our 6th spot, we have the alien hands. Okay, this is where it gets even weirder. In the same area where the skull was found, they found a hand with only 3 elongated fingers. It has nothing to do with the previously mentioned skull though. The skull is tiny, whereas the hand is larger than a human hand. So this hand type thing is said to be made of bone type material and some kind of skin. Just like the skull, the hand is also coated with clay. X-rays of this hand show that each finger has 6 bones. Human hands only have 3. Each of the fingers also contains something that is thought to be a fingernail, but we don't know exactly what creature this hand is from. Some thinks that it's from an animal, others are convinced that it indeed is an alien hand. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Gosford glyphs. The Gosford glyphs refer to the rock carvings that seem to resemble ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics that were found in New South Wales. In Brisbane Water National Park, there is a site that contains 2 8-foot-high walls that contain over 300 carvings. It is said that these glyphs are about 4,600 years old. Experts have ended up decoding the glyphs and say that in one section it talks about 2 brothers coming here from Egypt. They got shipwrecked on this land and one got bitten by a snake and passed away. But the most striking carving is one that looks like an alien spaceship. It has a classic UFO shape with rays shooting down. Egyptologists are confused by this carving as it doesn't fit in with all the other ones. but they believed that it had to be significant in order for them to carve it. Ancient astronaut theorists believe that these markings show that people have been in contact with aliens before. In our fourth spot, we have the UFO tooth wheel. A Russian man was using coal to heat his home when he realized something odd sticking out of one of the pieces of coal. Researchers stated that it looked like a toothed wheel. Testing of this object revealed that it was 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium. What's weird is humans didn't learn to make aluminum until 1825, but this coal piece is 300 million years old, and the tooth object appears to be artificially made. This object resembles parts that are used in things like microscopes or electronic devices. So, who created this object and what was it originally used for? Scientists are still conducting tests on the object with hopes of uncovering the answers to those questions. In our third spot, we have the Betts Mystery Sphere. On March 27, 1974, the Betts family were out examining a small brush fire near their property. While doing so, the family came across a completely smooth metal sphere about the size of a bowling ball. On the sphere, there was a triangle engraved on it. They took it home only to find out that it had very strange properties. One day when the Betts son was playing his guitar in the same room as the sphere started to emit a throbbing sound from it. The sound was strong enough to hurt the family's dog's ears. This sphere could also change direction, so if you pushed it or rolled it across the floor, it could roll forward, stop, and then roll right back to you. It was also said to be able to absorb power from solar energy, as it would be more active when exposed to the sun. The sphere would also sometimes emit vibrations as if something was operating on the inside of it. Now, they refused to let anyone analyze it until they linked the sphere to paranormal activity that started happening around their house. Like doors would slam or they would hear organ music around the house. So then they let scientists analyze it and said that it was just a normal sphere. But the family is convinced that something is controlling it. Maybe something of the extraterrestrial nature. Moving on, at number 2, we have the brass bell. In 1944, a 10-year-old boy by the name of Newton Anderson was shoveling coal into his furnace at his home. That's when a piece of coal was dropped and broke in half. Inside the coal revealed a mysterious bell. The coal that he was using was said to be about 300 million years old. Back then, the dominant life form on Earth was insects. So how could it have been manufactured back then? Also, the bell contained an unusual mixture of metals, including copper, zinc, tin, arsenic, iodine, and selenium. Not a typical combination used to make objects. Now, a man named Boris Billis ended up taking the bell to the geology department at the University of Delaware. From there, they conducted studies and discovered that the bell was handmade. Now, of course, people were skeptical, thinking that the boy lied and didn't find the bell in coal. But in 2007, he underwent a polygraph test conducted by a specialist who worked on death row cases. It was discovered that he was indeed telling the truth. His report has even posted online for others to see. So people again have linked this strange object to aliens. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Wedge of Aiud. In 1974, construction workers in Romania were working in a village in Aiud. They were working near a river when they found a collection of strange objects buried 30 feet in the sand. 2 of the objects were bones from mastodons, which are very distant relatives of the elephant. Beside the bones laid a mysterious wedge-shaped object. This object contained 89% aluminum, 6% copper, and a total of 12 elements altogether. Like I mentioned previously, aluminum wasn't discovered until around 1825. Yet this wedge lay next to bones that are from around 11,000 years ago. The wedge itself is theorized to be around 10,000 years old. People believe that this object just couldn't have existed back then. An aeronautical engineer stated that this object looks exactly like a piece of a landing gear for landing aircraft. This has left researchers to believe that extraterrestrials crashed here around 11,000 years ago, and this piece is part of their spacecraft.